Hey everybody, welcome to the NYC Real Estate Podcast. This is actually the first episode of 2025, and we've got a great guest today. We've got Amanda Gerome, and she's from A Electric. But before I get to you, Amanda, it's nice to see you. Thanks for coming
You as
into the
well.
studio. Just want to remind everybody that if you want to reach out to the show, you could do so at nycrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. I'm your host, I'm Mark Levine. I'm also one of the owners of EBMG. We are a company that manages about 100 co-op and condo clients across the city, but we also have another business that we actually launched in 2024 called Apex, and that's another 80 buildings that are rental residential buildings within the five boroughs. And I think we're managing about 80 of those buildings right now. So we're really in depth with management, been around for almost 30 years, and looking forward to keeping on growing this year and bringing more content to everybody that's listening at home. So today, Amanda, I wanted to kind of bring you on board because you are an electrician and you have A Plus Electric, which we've used as a company, and you've been very helpful as of late. So there are a few
Thank
topics that I wanted to discuss, and I'll give you the floor. I always like to give everybody the opportunity to kind of give the listeners and the viewers at home a little bit of an understanding of who I'm talking to. So I'll give you the floor right now. Tell us about you. How did you get into the business? And I would love to hear, from your perspective, being a female owning an electrician, an electric company that's traditionally male dominated that field. I would love to know how you got into that and how it's going so far.
Sure. Well, thank you, Mark, for having me and having A Plus Electric on your podcast. I'm super, super excited for
My
today's
pleasure.
episode. We have worked with you for a long time now, and your whole staff, and you are a pleasure to work with. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Um, a little bit about myself. So my family has been in the electrical industry for three generations. My grandfather, my father, and then my brother and I. A
Wow.
Plus Electric was formed 9 years back, and we started off small service work and then built it up, MWBE'd it, started doing huge uh, huge projects then from there, but really started small and just built
Yeah.
up slowly but surely. And now we have about 27 people on staff, and we are building and just doing our thing.
That's great. I'm a victim of nepotism also to a point, but I always say nepotism gets you in the door, but it's up to you to kind of kick the door wide open. So the fact
Absolutely.
that, you're layering on top of a family, opportunity and then kind of growing from there is admirable. So that's great.
Absolutely. And I will give a shout out to my whole team. We have Ryan, who is my brother as well. He's a co-owner and he's the operator. He's running
Yeah.
the manpower. He's doing everything behind the scenes, ordering the materials, dealing with all the problems that come at every moment so we could run all these projects during the day. And then we have our queen bee. I call her queen bee because her name is Beth, and
Yeah.
she's answering all the calls and doing everything she can when clients call in at every single second. Then we have Natalie. Then we have Natalie, who is our vice president, and she is a powerhouse. She just goes around New York, and she is not only sales and business development,
Yeah.
but she's also boots on the ground. So she understands her material and what she's
That's
looking at
great.
and estimate small projects. So the whole team together is really just it's just a good team and a family. And
That's
you know,
great. I
hopefully build
feel
on that.
I feel the same way. I think we're at a close to 60 or 65 employees, and everybody, the departments have shifted over the last uh, decade or so, and just seeing the growth and just seeing how people can work together as a team, that I have a similar workflow for that. And my recognition of my team, I think, is what propels you kind of into the future. So that's great.
Absolutely.
So today I really wanted to talk about some issues that we were having in the New York City kind of real estate scope of work with electric. The first topic we were talking before The Federal Pacific boxes that a lot of people have in their apartments that are, the circuit breakers that are the old style Federal Pacific. And I wanted you to kind of walk us through what those are. And I believe they're also stab locks also, right? So it's either a Federal Pacific or a stab lock.
So actually, the Federal Pacific is the manufacturer, and the Stablock is the model name of the circuit. So
Got it.
it's correlated, but people don't make that distinction because it really just goes together. Um,
Okay.
but I'll give you a little background. What are these? When did they come about?
Yeah.
And just so people understand what we're talking about. So in the 1950s to the 1980s, Federal Pacific, also known as FPE panels, were the most common manufactured circuit breaker panels. Now, the model name was Stablock, and now if you look at the Consumer Fire Safety Commission and listen to what they're saying, these panels are still around and they are making 2,800 fires on average per year.
Wow.
And this is because these breakers, I wish I could share, but I'm not going to because it's going to take me a while to share. These stab lock breakers are held by two little thin bars, which are grabbing the electricity. And those bars were taking the electricity up, and it just was it would overheat. And when it overheated, it wouldn't trip. And now we have different breakers that it's actually thicker and it will not trip. The biggest thing is that this circuit breaker was actually overlapping in the aluminum wire era. So the aluminum wire era was in the 60s and 70s, and the aluminum causes fires due to the expansion of the materials. What we have now is copper inside. So aluminum was used as a cheaper form of copper. So
Okay.
that's an important little detail that caused the problems that we see today. Now, another interesting fact actually is the mergers and acquisitions that happened between all of this. And you'll appreciate this as a business owner. So you had Federal Pacific, that was the starting company. Then it actually was bought out by UV Industries. Then it was bought out by Reliance Electric. And then Reliance Electric was bought out by Exxon for $1.2 billion,
Oh, wow.
actually. And so Exxon actually started figuring out what's going on. These breakers are not tripping. Why is this happening? And what was it? The one before, Reliance. And basically, the UL ended up getting taken away in the 80s, but they still continued to sell these panels. And they said, well, okay, the UL is taken away, but we could still sell them.
Right.
And basically, this is what we are still seeing in the apartments today. So if people have these, they're not even UL approved. The insurance companies, if they recognize that these are in your buildings, they will not renew the insurance on the building
Right.
because they're just, when they were tested, actually, and this was in the 1980s when the UL was taken away, it was tested and verified that 60% of the tripping ratio was dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And that was in the 80s. So can you imagine if just when the UL was taken away, you had a 60% ratio of the circuit breakers not tripping, and
Yep.
now we're in 2025, and you're walking through these apartments and the base building, the residential apartments, kids are living in them, and you're seeing full buildings with Federal Pacific panels
Yeah.
still.
So
So
what I'm up against now is, and this is really the last 10 or plus years, but even 10 years ago was 30 years after the UL was lost, and now we're 40 years essentially. But I'm having all these older buildings with that haven't yet upgraded these boxes in the apartments, and we're going out to the insurance market. And I've done other episodes on this where we are in a severe hard insurance market right now where there's carriers that are just doing anything at this point not to cover buildings. They're one of the things that they're looking at beyond the overall health of the building and violations and all that is, do these apartments have these federal Pacific boxes? And some of the requirements now are either replace them if you're with your current insurance company that does a inspection for you on your yearly inspection, and they kind of get a sense of that once they go into an apartment, or if you're trying to go outside and get a new carrier, most carriers won't even offer to carry your insurance if they see that you still have those. I have one building in Brooklyn right now where we're doing a project to replace all of these interior boxes one at a time. We bulk bid it out, of course, but the insurance company only agreed to carry us when we switched over to them with them knowing that, okay, we have to provide proof that this is going to be complete within a few months, because otherwise it's a fire hazard that they don't want to get involved in on the building.
absolutely. And if you look at the lawsuit that went on with Exxon, they were so mad that they acquired this problem that how in the world, if you saw a lawsuit, you see the lack of UL, you have the Consumer Product Safety Commission telling you it's 60% faulty in the 1980s. How in the world are these still allowed in the buildings? How are these not made into a local law yet? How are
Yeah,
everything else is the local law? Why is this not a local law?
correct.
And this is not just, listen, I believe in electrification. I believe in everything that we're doing with Local Law 88 and Local Law 97 and all the great things to get to a greener New York. But I will say this is a ticking time bomb. This
Yep.
is just a matter of time before a circuit breaker gets overloaded, it overheats, and a fire begins. So
Yeah.
I would urge whoever the powers that be at the Department of Buildings to make a local law out of this and make people change their Federal Pacific panels because of the uh, safety
Yeah.
right,
Well,
that we have.
you do see that New York City is a reactive city with regards to local laws. When we had the gas explosions, both on Second Avenue and up in Harlem, that's when they started the mandatory Local Law 152 gas inspections. From May 1st of 2025 are required by Local Law 157 to have gas sensors in each unit. So you see that they are doing things, but usually, from what I've experienced with the city, they are reactionary. They are not proactive. Um, the hope is that nothing ever happens, of course, that it turns into a local law because of somebody getting hurt, somebody, unfortunately dying as a result of these fire hazards. But we are going to kind of go through building by building on our side as management to work with the insurance companies, work with the boards, and work with the property owners to make sure that if there's ever a time to do these upgrades and to properly bid those out and have them done in scale for price wise, kind of now is the time before it becomes a bigger issue.
And also, what I see, and I see this in a lot of buildings that we are the in-house electrician for, I see people changing out as people move out as a progressive.
Yeah.
It's a vacant apartment. Now let's change the panel.
Yep.
But that could be in some of these tenant apartments 10 years before someone moves out. So I don't think, as a professional, I don't think that's the best approach either because this should be on the top of the priority list,
Yes.
um, no matter
Well,
what, no matter
and
what you're doing.
yeah, but from a co-op and condo perspective, usually either the bylaws of a condo or in the proprietary lease of a co-op, it marks out who's responsible for what inside the unit because you're an owner or you're a shareholder. And 9 times out of 10, or even 10 times out of 10, the electric, once it hits that box is the responsibility of that unit owner or that shareholder, and all the wiring throughout the apartment is also their responsibility. So some buildings may take more of a hands-off approach and say, okay, you're responsible for that. You have to do that. And then it's more of a piecemeal project. But I think when the insurance companies are putting a little bit of a boot on your throat and saying, okay, you're not going to be insured, or your price to be insured is going to be astronomical, which is happening anyway, then it turns into a project for the entire building, and then it's up to management to figure out, okay, and the board, are we going to do this on a complete building-wide project and bill everybody out, or is this going to be the responsibility of the individual? And I always like to say, let us as the management take it over as a building-wide project. This way we control not only the cost, because we can bulk bid it out, and 100 units doing it at one time is much better than one or two. But we could also make sure that it's done properly, and then it's paid, and then we get the charges back to the unit owner or the shareholder. So there's a lot of reasons why we should be doing it. Uh,
I completely agree with you.
yeah,
And that being said, I also think it's our responsibility to inform and educate the unit holders, the boards of the buildings, as well as some of the property managers, because property managers, they're dealing with plumbing, they're dealing with electric, they're dealing with HVAC, and it's not their fault that maybe they're not experts in this one element of what should be updated and what is a safety hazard. So if we are the in-house electrician, even if the building does not want to move forward doing this, once I see that, I always give the proposal, because in my head, it's my responsibility to keep those residents safe and to promote this. And
yeah.
if the building doesn't chooses not to do that for whatever the reason may be, we gave the proposal. A Plus Electric really was pushing to get this upgrade done for this precautionary element.
Yeah. And I always find it interesting, like you just noted before, and I agree with you that it should be some sort of a local law or a compliance effort to make sure that everybody's fireproof, and we do our best, for that. But just like when we're doing parapet inspections now, we're doing local law 11, which for tall buildings, and the onus is on the architect or the engineer who's inspecting to notify DOB if there's any unsafe conditions. I am kind of surprised that given the potential for the not only the fire hazard, the unsafe conditions, the potential for loss of property and death or injury, that hasn't risen to the level of maybe a master electrician having to notify DOB. So I'm
Right.
not trying to get more compliance out there, but I just find it interesting that because that's just another
Yeah.
layer of work that we have to do.
And
Um,
and the longevity of this issue. I think we're looking at this issue that started in the 1950s. I mean, it wasn't recognized as an issue, but the install started in the 50s.
yeah.
So this is not something that just came about. This is something where the UL was taken away in the 80s. So this should have been addressed, I think, entirely
Yeah.
long
I
before.
agree with you. So,
Yeah.
okay. So we've talked about Federal Pacific, and we've talked about the fire hazards and all of that. Um, right now we're dealing with local law 88 in all buildings that are greater than 25,000 square feet in New York City. I don't know if we've done actually an episode that has covered local law 88. I'd have to go back. Sometimes once you do an episode and you talk to people, you kind of forget about it because you do a lot. So
Yeah.
why don't you walk us through what Local Law 88 is and what we have to do for it?
Sure. So local law 88 was actually local law 132 and 134. These local laws were two separate local laws, one dealing with the lighting compliance, that we needed LED lights, and one dealing with the submetering portion. Those two local laws were then brought together. And when they brought them together, they said, why do we have them as two separate local laws? Let's bring them together. And this is what brought about local law 88. So there's different elements, different steps to this, where even if you are compliant, and I'll say this before and then backtrack to this, even if you are compliant, you still need, you're not out of you're not out of it. You still need to go and do your filing with the city. So you need to have that design professional, that master electrician, no matter what. Now, it's interesting because I see a lot of companies providing these audits, but they cannot do the work, they cannot file, but they're going around and doing these audits. And at A Plus Electric, we're very proud because we're giving you a turnkey solution. You don't need to deal with any other company. It is our job to take you to the finish line. So we're coming in, we're doing the audit, we're, getting you those that first inspection, the pre-inspection, we're with Con Edison, we're getting you the post-inspection, we're getting you the rebates, we're doing all the work to get you in compliance with the lighting. Then we're going into your sub-metering. We're giving you the proposal for that. We're giving you all the work for that. We're doing it. And then we're also able to stamp, seal, and file with the
That's
DOB.
great.
And so our thing that I like to really highlight to our clientele is that it's on us. If you hire us to do your local law 88, it's on us to get you to that finish line. It's not as if I did your audit and I passed you on to the
Right.
electrician to do the work. No, I did your complete, audit work and filing. And if something goes wrong, you know who you're calling.
Yeah.
I think that's a big deal where I think that's a big deal to note when you're picking the people that you hire for a local law, that you can hire a design professional, but then they will not be doing the actual labor.
Right.
So it's not it might not be what someone wants. So the first element of this is to distinguish if you are a covered building, they call it. And you could go onto the Department of Buildings website and you could look up Local Law 88, and they actually have a list of covered buildings, and it will say if your building's on it. Now, there are a couple of exceptions, which I'm not going to get into the different exceptions,
Hmm.
but most likely, if your building is on this list, you are considered a covered building. What does that mean? You're over 25,000 square feet. You have tenants that need to be sub-metered over 5,000 square feet. Your sub-metering has to be energy efficient, and the building owner is now required to submit a monthly energy bill to notify the client of the energy that they are utilizing. And this is because they want to be more transparent with the energy that they are utilizing. So,
Yeah.
for example, I have a building that has a Morton Williams on the bottom floor, and this Morton Williams was not sub-metered. It was they just gave them a monthly bill, and they would keep their lights on all night because it's good advertising. They're open till 12 o'clock in New
Yep.
York City. And now they are given that bill, they see all their numbers, and it's an element of transparency where you are encouraging these tenants and these business owners to say, hey, you're going to get charged for this now. And
Yeah.
I think that's great. So what I do want to do right now, if I could do a quick screen share.
Yeah, sure. And while you're doing that, I'll just kind of point out, I think there's a rolling down the hill effect here where if we're in this case of Morton Williams giving them their bill and they're starting to use less energy over time because they are just seeing what the cost is, that will also play into the local law 97 carbon emissions reduction that we have to provide for each building that's also over 25,000 square feet over a period of time. We have to lower the energy usage, and this is one more step in that direction.
So I'll piggyback off of that. I'm not able to do a screen share for some reason on my end. It's not showing up the pictures. It may be
Okay.
off topic due to my new computer system, but I'll keep going. So off topic, the penalties for local law 88 are very, very minor. But before I say that, I'll say there's a big caveat to that. So the penalties they're saying are $1,500 a building. Now, that is not entirely true because you look at that number, and then I read somewhere else that for your local law 97, because local law 88 is a portion of local law 97, if you are not compliant with 88, it pushes up the 97 penalty from 10K to 20K annually. And it also doesn't allow you to get permits. You can't get loans with the building. You can't sell the building. You can't get CO updates, and you're not functional. So there's a lot of these buildings that are thinking it's just that 1,500, and they are so wrong.
Yeah.
They're thinking that you want to take the rebates, take advantage of these rebates, and do this immediately, because if you start it now, not only will you get rebates, where I'm seeing some buildings who are getting $20,000 to $30,000 in rebates, depending on where they are, what they're eligible for. I'm seeing them, and then you see the payback per
Right.
year. You know, the ROI is astronomical if you do this early. So I really encourage people to not just look at that fine, which is false because you still have the 97 fine, but look that your building will be functional. So
Do you like to come to a building and kind of look around first if you're doing a one-off proposal versus a portfolio proposal? Or do you think that you could get a good sense from just the databases and Google Maps online as to what you need?
you have to look at every building. So every building requires an audit. So that's step one. We
Hmm.
would come on site, we would do an audit. And if I'm looking at my audits right now, but I can't show you. I have on the audit location, room notes, fixture type, fixture details, fixture wattage, line wattage, wattage, square feet, controls installed, our sensors required, is the zoning required, daylight required. It's a whole 5-page Excel layout, and when you're not compliant in that section that goes by rooms, we highlight it in red and we block it out as this is work that you need to complete in order to get into compliance. And at the bottom of the actual compliance report, you're going to get an LPD summary, which references the lighting, the control summary, and the submetering summary. And each section will either be green for pass or red for fail. And the goal to be compliant with 88 is to get all those green, because we need to stamp our seal right
Right.
there. So we need to stamp 3 times and say, okay, they're in compliance, and we're responsible to send in this report to the DOB when we're doing your filing. So that's kind of the surface level of walking you through all of this. But I think it's very important for people to know, exactly like I said, that this is not just about 88. This is not just about that $1,500 fine. This is goes into 97. This goes into your functioning, your functionality, excuse me, as a building. You want to be able to get those permits. You want to be able to, get COs, and you will not be able to. So I cannot stress that enough. Get into compliance with 88 and just do it early, because it's right around the corner. It's May
It
1st.
is. Yep. Just like the local I-157 gas detectors. The May 1st is coming very quickly because we're almost in February when we're recording this. It's January 27th. So we've got
Wow.
3 months. That's it. Three
Yeah.
months.
And the truth
Um,
is, even if we have people calling us about this every day. And if you start tomorrow, I hope you could get in compliance, because everyone's doing the same thing right now.
yeah,
And the actual verbiage for the rebates is until substantial completion.
right.
So you are eligible until there's a depletion of these funds, and everyone's reaching for the same funds right now. So it's something you really want to touch base about now.
Do you have portfolio pricing for companies that are like mine, where you have maybe a bunch of, properties that can come in at the same time? Or do you think that each building is so individualized that you can't really kind of estimate what just a flat fee would be?
So we've been doing it by building, because you have to go in and
Mhm.
you really need to do this audit by building. But what we did do is, when we come in to do the compliance report, if it's someone that is our client, we give a reduced rate for
Right.
the actual compliance report. So the compliance report, if you're our client and we know that you will proceed to do the work with us, we're very easy with that pricing.
Yeah.
And we're giving you fair because we want to get the project. And
Yeah.
that's the idea with going with an electrician to do 88, I think is the advantage here because the compliance report is not where we're making our money. We're
Right.
making our money because we want to do a turnkey process for you. We want the actual labor intensive work, which is
Yep.
the next portion of this. So I think that it's very individualized because each building, one building needs a sensor here, one building only needs LED, one building only needs submetering. And I don't know, even by specs, it's
Yeah, but from another
very
point also, I mean, if we had an engineer that's going and looking at the initial review and then providing us with the what we need, that doesn't preclude us from going to you and saying, okay,
absolutely.
here's our scope of work, here's what we need, and obviously, can we price this out and then go to completion on that? So,
Absolutely, it doesn't, but it might be more expensive because the
yeah,
engineer, yeah, it might be more expensive, but it doesn't. We do that a lot. We get reports, compliance reports that are already completed, and we're pricing out solely the labor and materials, and basically they'll take it back to whoever they were, and then that an engineer will either sign off, or if it's an energy company, they'll probably sub out some type of engineer, or there's some type of third party stamping
yeah,
compliance. You could do that as well. But if you want a turnkey solution, the only option is electrician.
yeah. All right, great. I think, we've covered a lot today. So just kind of circling back, we talked about the Federal Pacific, we talked about the insurance issues, we talked about Local 98, we kind of touched upon Local 97. Um, and if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way? And I'm going to link all this also in the description of the podcast and the video when I upload this.
Sure. So they could either email me directly, which I won't spell it out because it will be linked.
Yeah, you can tell me it, or you can
Or
tell
okay,
everybody
so it's
else it too.
A Gerome, Agerome as in Mary, at A plus spelt out, APLUS, ELEC, short for electric.com.
Right.
Or my mobile number is best because I'm always out on job sites, 516-978-8658. And we're happy to assist, whether it's Federal Pacific panels, whether it's Local Law 88, or we also have a small maintenance department where we'll come in for a minimum service call. And if you have an outlet that's out, we'll fix that for you. So we're really small, big, it
That's
doesn't
great.
matter. We just want to take care of you and make sure that you're as functional as possible and that your life is easy.
I appreciate that. That's good to know because I think half my electric calls are I'm a resident and my kitchen is, an outlet is not working. How can it's funny enough, I had one board member who had no electric in half of her apartment, and I called the electrician over for her at her cost. I'll be upfront about that. She fully paid for it. She just flipped by accident one of the breakers and didn't turn it back on. So that was a service
Yeah.
call for nothing, but at least it wasn't something more serious. But yes, that's half of our calls are dealing with those types of issues, and it's good to know that you can cover that. I really appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you
Um,
for having us. I really
yeah,
appreciate you having A plus electric. And can I ask you something?
sure. Go ahead. Nobody ever
How
asked me anything.
did how did you start a podcast? I think this is so
So
great.
I started doing videos probably back in like 2013 that I still have on YouTube, and you can watch my weight gain and my hair loss
Oh gosh.
from all that time. And then I just decided when I saw that podcasting was kind of the way that things were going, I was just like, you know what? I've got all the equipment anyway because I was doing all my audio stuff for my visual products that I was doing. And I said, okay, let me try doing a podcast and getting to be, I think when you put out certain information to a very niche kind of group, I feel like it's very well received by that niche. Like I know that I'm not going to get a million people listening. But if I get 30 of the right people listening, that's all that matters. And that's all you need. And I don't need more than that. And what I like about doing the podcast is like I go to a lot of trade shows and I have my booth where we set up for my company, EBMG, and people will come over that I've never met and they're like, "Oh yeah, I listen to the podcast. I've seen your videos. This is how I learned to be a property manager was through your information." So
Right.
I know that it's hitting the right people, and I think that it's great for both connections and getting the word out on different laws. But selfishly, it's also a way for me to get it out to my clients. Like if I know that there's something that I want to talk about and push out to my clients, I can have the people on here who I want to hear from, and how are we like staging this information and then getting it out to them that way. So it really is it pulls, for the self-advertising stuff, but I think it's also great to make connections, and it's also great to provide value to the clients and also to provide value to people who I may never meet and may never hire me, and they can work with their managers on this stuff. And
Right.
I think I like, doing that. But I used to, way before this, I used to be on a TV show on FiOS on Long Island, and I did
Mm.
about 105 episodes of the show on camera, and it was called Restaurant Hunter. And all we did was go to restaurants, and it was a half-hour show that was on
Oh,
weekly.
cool.
And I did, as I said, I think 105 episodes of that from 2005 to 2013, something like that. So I was always very comfortable in front of the camera, and I translated that over to my real estate stuff. And I don't do that anymore. It's been 10 years since I've done that. But it's just something I enjoy. So
Well,
it's nice.
listen, I applaud you because I know being a business owner, we have so many things that are coming in
Oh
every
my God.
opposite direction every single day. So for you to
Yeah.
actually find the time to educate not only your staff, but your potential clients and just fellow colleagues,
Yeah.
it's huge.
It's hard.
It really is huge.
I think I only did two or three episodes in 2024. I was slacking because I was also growing a new company that we launched. So my time was limited, but now that that's kind of up and running, my intent, I've already got three of these podcast episodes scheduled for, different guests for the next week or two. So the hope is that in 2025 we start bringing it back and having more of an input onto like the changing landscape. And I'm glad we provide value. I'm glad we get to bring you out in front of everybody and have you meet, the world of whoever's listening to the NYC Real Estate Podcast. But I really appreciate your time. As I said, I'm gonna put all of your information on the video and on the description of the podcast itself, so everybody will have some time to reach out to you.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you for having us. We're so happy, A Plus Electric, to be here, and we appreciate you.
All right, thanks, Amanda.
Take care.
Bye
Bye.
bye.